first of all, let me say that you should be getting your copy of Town and County through the door this week. Some of you will have got it yesterday, and others will get it today, and it's a damn good read. Even if I do say so myself. Well, there are 4 or 5 articles in there that you can actually ignore, but because I know who they're written by. That's oh, no. It's technology. Simple though it may seem to you, it can defeat me. Yeah, there we go. But Town and County is out, and it's monthly. It's colourful, well laid out, well published, and it's got the odd decent article in there. So do watch out for it. Many people are commenting upon it. It's coming through the front door. A lot of people throw these things away without even taking a look, and it's always difficult, even though there are 18,000 or so people who receive it, is how many people actually don't bother to look at it. But it seems there's a high proportion of Town and County, and I'm delighted to say that the odd word that I write in it has been read, because I put little tricky bits in to see to see whether anybody notices. If you've read it, you notice. So, somebody comes up and says, oh yes, we read your article. Did you notice? Oh, no. Well, you didn't read the bloody thing. But one of the wonderful gifts that we have is to be able to read. And strangely enough, it's one of the skills that is dying out with the electronic era. It hasn't always been particularly good. Way back in the 70s, I remember speaking to the aide to a senator in the United States, and he said, the trouble with our politicians is they simply don't read. And I looked at him with surprise, and he said, because they've got people who actually get the newspapers and get books and so on and so forth, and they just put a yellow mark to the bits that they think that the boss will be interested in, so they don't read themselves. It's a tragedy. It's a wonderful skill. And I just do wonder when our local councils try to make it more difficult to get into a library, that whether they can read either or whether they recognise it as a skill. Great pity. But then again, one of the things that I'm noted for at the moment, I'm a curmudgeon. I'm sort of almost like Tom Paine, obsessive about governments and government, and I'm not terribly happy with the way things are. Anyway, I'm Keith Hayes, and this is Mirador Television, and we come from not quite the south coast of England, but for southeast England. We broadcast from Battle to Brighton, but because we're the web, we actually tip over into other parts of the world. My apologies this morning to those people who do follow us in. Well, actually, we've got a widespread viewership in the Balkans, the odd person in Russia, the Baltics, the United States, in Canada, and I'm grateful that we are able to talk to them. And what I really think it shows is that this is a global village, so-called. The sort of problems that we have locally are reflected in the problems that people locally have in a good many other parts of the world. So, although I'm apologising for talking about Lewis particularly this morning, there is always a spark elsewhere to say, yes, we've got that same problem. One of the problems with the councils is the so-called cabinet system. And I was just reading up on an article this morning about why so many of us do not vote, couldn't care less about the local elections, and why we should, because they're almost more important than they are nationally. Part of it is because the national people make far more noise. They grab the headlines of the newspapers, and of course we have a shrinking media, local media, and I'll get onto that in a moment. But our councils don't make enough noise, and in my opinion, they deliberately don't make enough noise. They are terribly secretive, and that's not what a local council should be about. We should know what's going on. Okay, you may say, well, why should the council bother to tell us things that it doesn't want us to know? That's the job of the media, and indeed it is. The trouble is that because of the economic circumstances surrounding media as such, but traditional media, brought on by the popularity of getting information off the internet, off the web, means that we don't have the same examination that we had even 10 years ago. There was a journalist locally in Lewes called John Eccles who was everywhere. He turned up at everything. And he was a very, very good example of local journalism. He knew people. He knew what was going on. Well, that's disappeared in the main. Generally speaking, the media, whether it's the Sussex Express or it's the local BBC, have such a wide remit. They don't have the people to do it, and they can't afford the people. In fact, the owners of the Sussex Express had a very heart-rending moment a couple of months or so ago. It looked as if they might go out of business. They were saved, I'm happy to say, and that meant that papers up and down the country, local papers were saved, but it just shows the parlous nature of the media. So doing the job that we used to do is not easy. In this particular instance, I'm happy to say that I'm now getting one or two people to give me some help, because we are growing as an audience. We're growing an audience for Mirador Television. In some instances, we're getting as many as 10,000 people tapping into the sort of rant that I do each morning. Other times, when they're feeling particularly unhappy with me or with the circumstance, it can go down to a couple of thousand. But nonetheless, our voice is growing, and the people in the councils are beginning to understand that we exist. Are we replacing the local media? On our own, no, because our resources are so thin that we rely upon others to report a lot of what we talk about. However, what we have got, we've got a number of, quote, citizens. We've got people who notice things, who are observant in the streets as they walk around Lewes, and they're observant in the things that they hear, the chatter they hear in the supermarkets, and they come to me and say, Keith, did you know? And that gives me a steer as to the sort of thing that we should look at. But even then, Mirador Television cannot be a proper local media, if you like, and reporting agent on local councils and local activity all on its own. So we rely heavily upon those same citizens who actually tip me off from time to time and say, you should take a look at this, or you should take a look at that. What they do is they also, a lot of them, subscribe to the Facebook groups. Now, if you're not familiar with the Facebook groups, and I think most of you are, on Facebook there are sites or pages, and you will see that say Lewes Present or New Haven Gossip or things of that nature. And what they are is they're forums for people to have a little natter about things. Now, they can natter as things about, where do I find a pound of butter after 6 o'clock at night? Or my cat is lost and please keep an eye open. And they serve a very good purpose in that regard. Let's make no mistake. But also, from time to time, somebody will say, guess what? The road leading up to the racecourse has had all the foliage hacked down. What on earth is going on? And those are the sort of things that highlight the items that we should take a look at, and we do try to take a look at. But even then, we don't have the resources. So our eyes and ears are those groups. If you don't subscribe. Sometimes you may tap in and say, what rubbish. Other times you may tap in and say, my gosh, that's interesting. Sometimes you may be moved to tap in and actually put in some thoughts of your own. And then you're contributing to the viewer focus, if you like, upon the local council and helping us to try and keep it straight, on the straight and narrow. But there are two other vital ingredients. One is Lewes Eye, which is a website. Don't know who it's run by, but I continue to say with some admiration as a good long-standing hack that whoever it is a damn good investigative journalist and comes up with the detail that is so essential for us to start to hammer at the local council and say, why is this going on? Because enough goes on behind closed doors, believe me. It is the nature of politicians and of the people that work for them, the executive, to hold things very close to their chests. They let you know what they want you to know. And then they bravely say, well, we put our press releases up on the web. Ha ha, bully. That's great PR and publicity. Still, never mind. If that's what they're going to do, that's what they're going to do. And we must then try to pry open the can. But Lewis Eye does an excellent investigative job, and obviously we look at what they have to say. We do the old journalistic thing, is to double check from two independent sources to make sure that we're not passing on fake news. But then there is the latest addition to Lewis Media, Town and County, and although it is a lifestyle magazine, it does turn up one or two things that are worthwhile, and the editor, Sean Kane, and his associate, Richard Judd, are both very aware that we do need, as media, to keep our eye on the local councils, on local business and so on, to make sure that we, the public, are not being ripped off, that we, the public, are not being duped, that we, the public, are getting fair value for money. Well, we're not at the moment. Many surveys now, because it started off with Harvard, why wouldn't it? I mean, Mr. Harvard came from Ringers. We should pay attention to anything Harvard University says. Harvard in the United States found that we got similar problems here, and other people have now taken up the cudgel. The less local media you have, the more you have incompetence in local government, and the higher your council tax goes. Well, Lewis reflects that admirably. High taxes, low efficiency, despite the fact that they pat themselves on the back and say what a wonderful job that they're doing. Well, they're not. And I think that that's where they start to look foolish. By saying it, everybody knows that they're not. And as a journalist, I shouldn't say everybody knows, but the fact is it's a talking point that you simply can't get through. You can't get to them. You can't contact them to find things unless you haven't paid your council tax. Then they find you. Believe me, they find you as fast as they possibly can. And it's the only way sometimes of forcing them out into the open. But there we go. The one thing I wanted to talk about this morning, and I haven't really got time, but I will talk about it tomorrow, is the apathy that we have. We get what we deserve. We don't turn out. In England, the average turnout for local elections such as this is 35%. And the analysis shows that we sort of shrug our shoulders and say, what difference will my vote make? Well, that's fallacious to start off with. Your vote counts. Secondly, we have got the party system, and the party system does not work at local level. And that's why we've got these iniquitous cabinets, because what happens when we don't vote, and I've run out of time, when we don't vote, and we allow things to go on just as they are, is we get governed by a very, very small group of people who, the people that we elect as councillors, barely have a say. They barely know what's going on. So how on earth are we going to find out if they don't know? So when you elect a councillor, elect one who's going to actually be effective. The best way is to elect an independent. But we've only got about 4 independents running. I made a plea, get rid of party politics. But until we get bigger independent party, or not party, but a bigger independent group, the more we're going to suffer from the sad old way that we've done things in the past. Enough for this morning. I've had a wonderful rant. I feel, actually, by the time I finish these things, I really enjoy myself. And then I normally go out to the local coffee shop to get a coffee. And there is a group of people that we've dubbed the Cabinet there. They are very intelligent, very articulate and very aware young men, and we have a little natter about what's happened in Westminster and what's happening down here locally. And it's a good way for me to get feedback on some of the things that I've said and to see what the general public are thinking about them as well. So I'm off. to have a cup of coffee, a chat to the cabinet, despite the fact that I don't approve of cabinets. And I'll see you tomorrow morning, and we'll have another rant and another rave. But let's get it right. Let's get the governments that we deserve, not the governance that we normally get. Toodle pip.